Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Anna Maqbool with you at PTV WORLD. In today's show, we will be taking a look at two very important stories. The first is with reference to the national security meeting that was held earlier today and the issues that were discussed in them. Of course, there are many issues of regional and domestic concern that were, of course, part of the discussion. There were senior members from the government and the military leadership also part of the NSA, and of course the issue of the Taliban, the TTP and the Afghan Taliban's role in this regard was also under discussion. We'll take a look at exactly what was discussed, what are the major issues that the country currently faces today, and possibly what can be done about those measures, specifically with regards to the spike in terrorist activities, and of course the talks that need to be started once again with the TTP by the military leadership, and whether or not we'll be able to see some positive outcome from that. So that's going to be our first topic of the show today. Our second segment is going to take a look at the Punjab by-elections, which are going to be held on the 17th of July on 20 seats that have been left vacant in Punjab, and there has been different schedules of political parties and their rallies that has been announced. PTI has also given a massive schedule of various rallies, so has Bimalan and other parties as well. So we're going to see how the campaign is going to be run by different political parties and what sorts of issues are going to be taken into account, and whether or not we're going to see the kind of support that both the parties expect from their voters in these by-elections, and how that is going to impact the re-elections of the Punjab Chief Minister to be held on the 22nd of July as per the court's orders. So we're going to take a look at all of that in our second segment of the show today. For this and more, I've been joined in the studios as always by Farrukh Pitafi and Raja Faisal. And for our first segment with regards to the national security meeting, we have been joined online by Dr. Syed Kaleem Imam, who's a former IG police, and also Colonel retired Abid Latif, who's a foreign affairs expert. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us and being a part of the show today. I'll start with you, Colonel Abid. When we look at the current situation, there are, of course, numerous challenges that we understand that the country is currently facing. And a lot of the times we understand that there are issues of terrorist concerns and other regional and international security threats as well. But there is so much that has been talked about as a measure against it. We still haven't really seen any progress with regards to the TTP's talks. We understand that there is going to be another round that is going to be held soon, but what is really going to be the way forward, particularly in terms of the regional and security concerns that, of course, the country faces today? Today's NSA must have encapsulated all of that. Can you give us an idea of the main concerns on the security front that we have at the moment, and with particular reference to the TTP, how do you think we can proceed?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The main focus of, as far as the internal security is concerned, during this session, which was held today, was on the TTP and the ongoing negotiations and the talks which is undergoing between Pakistan and the TTP. As far as this problem is concerned, this problem is little deep-rooted, because there are three things which actually define these types of war, in which the level of war is low intensity, and where there is terrorism, and the means of deciding or means of perpetration is the acts which are heinous. I'm talking of the terrorist acts. So one thing is the geography and the tactics and the technology. These three things define these types of wars. And we have been through last 2 decades, and particularly the last decade and a half, we have seen that the Pakistani armed forces, through their sheer resolve, and the people of Pakistan, particularly the people of Fatah, and also the urban people of the urban areas of Pakistan, they responded with the most precise, with the most impeccable, the demonstration of bravery and resolve as a nation. Now, as the progress towards this phase of the talk is taking place, this is also linked with the government in Afghanistan, which is of Taliban, and Pakistan has reiterated and made it a point that the present government of Taliban is supposed to, or rather it is it is rather incumbent upon them not to support this segment, which is creating disturbance at our part of the territory. And today's main focus was also on this point, that Pakistan will once again has to make this point very clear to the neighbor, and will also try to unhinge the elements which are trying to support or trying to link up the cooperation or the connectivity between Taliban and the local segments, which are trying to once again up the ante in the tribal areas of Pakistan concerning the terrorism. As far as the other challenges are concerned, as you have said, that we have other security challenges which are coming up once, right in the Kashmir, in international arena, where a lot of activity is going on, especially linking our neighbor, which is being almost taking the center stage as far as the global politics is concerned. So this particularly for me, as far as my evaluation is concerned, I think today's national security conference and today's national security conference was focused on the rebalancing, both rebalancing in terms of our internal politics, internal security, and also the rebalancing in terms of our international relations, or how to go about it and how to redefine and realign the state towards a place or towards a mechanism where we can play our already traditional positive role in the world peace.
Right, absolutely. Dr. Kaleem, when we look at the various issues, of course, that are a matter of concern, there's a lot that is going on at the domestic front as well. And of course, I understand that the kind of role that Pakistan expected from the Afghan Taliban and the kind of help that perhaps it can extend is something that can be talked about. But with reference to what is going on within our own country, within our cities, within different places across Pakistan, there's of course the issue also of how we can collaborate with different institutions regarding security concerns and those who provide security in the streets, the police and the military as well, together, so that there can be safer places within the country. Is that sort of framework still there? Because we've talked about an entire policy, but what really are the mechanisms to go about it?
Thank you very much for inviting me, and I'm grateful of the learned panelists over here. What I would start saying is we already have three policies which are existing, actually respond and to counter the situation that we are facing right now. We came up with a national action plan. There are 20 points in the agenda, and some of them are still very, very useful and vital. One of them is reforming the criminal justice system. Secondly, we have national internal security. It discusses the composite deterrence plan and comprehensive response, which means going to the root cause of trying to see how it emulates, what best can be done to ensure that it doesn't stem and doesn't grow. We also have that kinetic barriers in place where we can take actions to counter when we see one. We have also come up recently with national security policy. So again, the policy binds all the civil and the military institutions to be to work together in consensus, synergizing their efforts, resources, and the strategy. So my first take is that we have policies. I would emphasize that the stakeholders should realize to build their capacity, understand these papers have been prepared after a lot of input from people, from the military, from civil armed forces, from the law enforcement agencies and think tanks. So we need to ensure that we follow those things that have been agreed upon. And I think once we do that, half our problem will be over. My third thing would be like, how are we going to deal with this TTP situation? Who is going to deal with it? And what is going to be the content? These are the questions that we should be asking ourselves. And these are the questions the team who are negotiating are trying to settle. For me as a law enforcer, and what I see that the National Internal Security Policy says, I believe that the civil administration, which includes the administration parts and the law enforcement, which is the police part, should play a very principal role. They always have support of the armed forces and they are always there to support. But let's bring them forward and let's ensure that the district administration, the divisional administration, the law enforcement after the merger of FATA, the people are there, involve them, and they have more ingress. My last point before I go to any other question that you ask, I think the best way forward to answer, which may sound like it's a soft answer, it's a community policing. We have FATA, we have merger. It's time to interact and build partnership as much as we can. Only then there will be an ownership, and once they see the inclusiveness in what is happening, I'm sure it's going to make a difference. It has to be this.
Colonel Abid, earlier you mentioned our eastern neighbor. Of course, there are lots of things which are going on within Kashmir as well. G20, we are hearing from the Indians that G20 summit, they are planning to hold it there. And of course, Pakistan has reservations over it. Not only Pakistan, but people of Kashmir has, obviously they have reservations over it. So, can we say that right now it will be one of the concerns for Pakistan, and of course Pakistan needs to lobby against it, because Pakistan needs to tell the world that India should not be allowed to ignore two of the other parties, because there are three parties when we talk about Kashmir. Of course, India considers itself a party, then of course Pakistan and people of Kashmir. There are three parties. Rather than going for this G20 summit, all of the bigger mites of the world, they should be trying to bring all three parties on the table to resolve the conflict. And I think Pakistan needs to look into that as well, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. You see, actually, India, the South Bloc, Indian Foreign Office, they think that India has traversed a journey through the foreign relations, or I would say in their foreign policy, from non-alignment then to strategic autonomy, and then now they say, okay, this is the multipolarity. The world has become multipolar. This is the multipolar moment, and so they want to cash upon that. And they think, and they presume also, and they depict it also in their manifestations, particularly in terms of their diplomacy, that they are the emerging pole of this region, and for that they think that they are qualified to be taken as a country which can surrogate the international world order, particularly in this region. That is the reason that they also, if we see the Quad and the things which are happening in the Pacific, and especially the Indo-Pacific, and we also think, we see the things which are happening across in Arabian Sea, so, and in Africa, and the Indian Ocean part of it. So once we take it, we agree that India, because of its economic, of the giantness of, or its economy which is coming up, or the middle class, which is now at the pinnacle of, supply chain, and it is also challenging in some way, not completely, but in some way, the Chinese economic activities. So if you take that, but it does not mean that those issues which are international issues and which are unsolved, unresolved issues of the United Nations and the Charter of the United Nations, that have to be ignored. If by becoming...
Farrukh, let me just come to you with something. Dr. Kaleem was earlier speaking about the national security policy, and remember you had a comprehensive interview with the former national security advisor on this issue. And right now where we stand, since then, have you seen any sort of progress or substantial contribution of the national security policy in the way that we have reacted to our security concerns?
Right, Sana, I think it is a very important question, but with your permission, let me shed some light on the importance of the event today.
Sure.
The Parliamentary Committee on National Security is a very important body, If you remember last time there was a meeting, in-camera meeting, it was regarding the very policy that you were mentioning, right? The national security policy. That was adopted, but it actually promised many changes in the country that are going to take some time to actually be implemented.
Okay.
I think there is a military component and there is a civilian component. When you talk about the military component, because the forces have the discipline, or even the LEAs, they have the kind of discipline that is needed, they usually implement those changes very quickly. But it was about a systemic change, and I think it will take some time to take. But regarding today's meeting, you can understand the importance of today's event by the fact that not only all 62 members, including the Prime Minister, are invited, but the 3 services chiefs are also attending. And then the intelligence chiefs are also there. So that means that the topics or discussions must not be about one specific thing, although media keeps on reporting it is going to be essentially about TTP. But we have seen since the war on terror started, and Pakistan has been systematically fighting terrorism in this country and building bridges where one can. We have seen similar kind of closed door meetings of the parliamentary sessions, and then the National Security Committee also in the parliament in-camera sessions, where all lawmakers are briefed. What I surmise from the importance of this event is the fact that it must appear to be, it is essentially about some kind of milestone. Something new has happened and something so important that this committee is being taken into confidence. I think that TTP is important, but what India is doing, whatever else is happening in the region is also important. We end up talking about Afghanistan, and we end up talking about India, but there are other neighbors which are very important. China, for instance. Then Iran is also very important, right? Then remember that we have such a long coastal belt. That's why Navy's involvement is also important. So all these things, I think the lawmakers are being briefed, and this is democracy in action.
All right.
Dr. Imam, I wanted to come towards you.
Can I add a
as
word?
Farrukh has rightly pointed out that there are other neighbors as well. So I'll talk about internal security that would concern almost all of the neighbors. If we talk about CPAC, we very well know that our eastern neighbor, he has always been trying to disrupt and to dismantle Pakistan's CPAC progress. And we know that attacks were being conducted on Chinese as well, and attacks were being originated from Afghanistan. Of course, the attackers, they were entering in Pakistan from that side. Of course, BLA, BLF, they are getting support from a few of the factions of BLF. They are sitting in Iran, and few of them, they are of course in Afghanistan. So if we look at CTD, only yesterday they conducted an operation in which they have captured miscreants, plus they have they have looked into their mechanism which was being handled from Afghanistan, from within Afghanistan, and they have captured their IEDs and everything. But right now, of course, if we talk about internal security, especially related to CPAC, it goes beyond the borders. So how that would be conducted? And second thing I wanted to ask, obviously you are someone who has served Pakistan security services. You have been IG police. Of course, police has its own sacrifices in war and terror still going on. Are you happy with the mechanism which are being followed, or you think there should be some improvements in them?
And to narrow the scope of these questions, particularly because today Sharjeel Memon, the spokesman of Sindh government, also spoke about the Karachi incident. Do you think that the security tiers and security measures in Karachi are now beefed up, and at this moment the CPAC related security is in place?
Thank you. I think these are some of some wonderful questions which comes to mind, And for me, the hostile countries are always looking for space, and they will always try to disrupt. Sorry, the light has gone. Oh, it's just back. So the neighboring countries would always do. The hostile countries would always do what they have been doing. And if they are not doing, in fact, you would say they are not doing their job. I would return back to this point. Yes, they will try to take space. They have been trying to infiltrate. They have been trying to do things which has brought destruction to us. My point is, I know this is happening. So what am I supposed to do? That's my point. And I say that after a big exercise, we have come up with some wonderful documents. Why are we not implementing it? The Sana also asked me this question. You see, we have everything on paper. Are we building capacity? Are we involving stakeholders? Are we putting enough resources? Are we trying to check the impact of these policies? Or is it just on paper? That's something we need to question ourselves. Secondly, again, I would say, like a question was raised, at the diplomatic level for Kashmir and other things, there are standard models available which you can follow, and if it doesn't succeed, you can see the impact and you can come up with something more. And one of them would be like engaging professional diplomats. I would say engaging diaspora of that country, going to the universities. I go to a lot of universities, and I think one of the best thing is that we should start going to universities, think tanks, and many other places. And maybe they are going, but we need to do it more. But again, as far as internal security is concerned, if we still don't focus on the root cause, and we keep on fighting terrorists instead of fighting terrorism, we would be where we started. I keep on saying that state.
But Dr. Saab, sorry to cut you. This actually takes me back to 2014 and 15 when we came up with National Action Plan. And that, if you remember, had quite a comprehensive list of things to do. Do you think that since then we have been slacking?
Yes, we have been slacking. We carried out a couple of the points in the agenda very well. And I always felt bad that reforming criminal justice system was the last but on the least, you can say. And the reforms never took place the way it should have taken place. Now we know what is happening. We know what are the challenges. We know how it can be overcome. Now the overcome measures need to be followed. This is what I'm trying to emphasize. So if you are talking about the borders, if you're talking about the situation which is taking place over there, and even negotiation with TTP, the question is we know what they want. We know where we stand. We know what can be achieved. Now there would be a consensus point where we all agree, and we must make take advantage
All right.
of that.
Let me also go to Colonel Abed and speak about the national security policy. When it came out, there was a discussion on what really is security and the different aspects that it's going to encapsulate. And there was a lot of talk about how it needs to be more holistic, particularly in terms of extending that to economic security of the citizens. And considering the kind of challenging situation that we're currently living in and the economic measures that the country has taken, do you think we are aligned in terms of the national security policy in providing the economic security to our citizens?
Yeah, Sana, as Farrukh Saab has said and as Dr. Saab has earlier said, and I was saying that today's national security meeting was actually, I would say, and I have a fair presumption about that, it was a rebalancing act in which all the aspects of national security, be it the political, be it the economic, be it the kinetic, be it related to the internal security, were discussed in threadbare. The reason is that now there is a comprehensive and wholesome definition of national security. It is no more only the kinetic part of it. It is very overwhelmingly, as Dr. Saab was saying, that National Action Plan, we have, traversed a little of the space and more of it as far as the society is concerned, the kinetic space and the security space and, the policing space was traversed. But the other space in which the reforms were to be made, particularly in the social segment of the society, I think we were lacking in that. And these things were also today discussed, because you cannot uproot terrorism or you cannot uproot the low intensity part of any conflict unless you modify, you identify, and you engineer in positive terms the society. So I think the comprehensive part of it, because everyone knows that economically Pakistan is passing from a very tough patch, and we are having a little, a tough time because of so many reasons, and those could be political, those could be part of the inefficiency of the system or whatever it is. But I think the most important thing is to define, to realign, and to give the direction. I think today it was very clearly chalked out, and it was given that if we have to, survive this crisis, then a direction has to be followed. I think this was given.
Right. Colonel Sindhu, I'm so glad that you particularly talked about economy as well, because whenever we talk about economy or the state of economy, we are told that we have to do this bucket of reforms. And it seems that all those reforms have to be done in the future, and we hardly have done anything in the past. Similarly, when it comes to National Action Plan, once again, it seems that there is a lot to be done. And my concern is that from fighting terrorism to negotiating with dissident groups, or for that matter any sub-nationalist groups, every time we are here, we end up talking about what needs to be done next. Why is it that our imagination seems to be truncated? What happens if Afghanistan is run over by Taliban? Okay, there might be some kind of space, there might be some kind of influence, but what exactly will be Afghan Taliban's influence inside Pakistan? Hardly any debate on that. Similarly, when you talk about talking to TTP, I understand that there is a question of mainstreaming, but what happens to their leadership, hardened criminals, and why would they surrender themselves to Pakistan authorities when they know that they are going to face justice? These are big questions, and nobody seems to be talking about that.
Yeah, you are right. Actually, whenever you talk of a strategy or a plan, it is like a river. It has three things. Every river, it has a past, it has a present, and it has a future. And simultaneously, it has three things. A flowing river has simultaneously three things. So policy or a comprehensive and a successful strategy, it has to be imbibed in all these three things: past, present, and future. I think whatever we have been doing, whatever the state has been passing through since last 2 decades, I think the realization, as you have already pointed out, the realization is there that now the policy has to have a present and a future also.
Colonel Abid, the very quick question, whenever we saw India was, internally in problems, and of course today they are, there is a mechanism that they have, always adopted, and that is of false flag attack within Kashmir, and obviously then shifting all of the momentum of that internal troubles towards Pakistan and bashing Pakistan. They start bashing Pakistan. Do you think that right now there are possibilities of some kind of false flag attack within India to blame Pakistan, number one? And number two, recently we saw, they trying to mend their ways with the Taliban regime in Kabul. Obviously, they are still trying, and they are to some extent, successful as well. Should we be concerned about it, sir?
Okay, I have to pull up the definition from the dictionary of quick question. But Colonel Saab, I'm very intrigued that you actually used the analogy of river, comparing it with strategy. They say that you never step in the same river twice. So is it true of strategy as well?
Yeah, I know you never come across the same river. That is, that was in a lighter way I was trying to define the strategy, that has to be in the present and future, because if it is not laced with present, it is of no use. As far as the question on Kashmir was concerned, whenever you listen to S. Jaishankar, the foreign minister of India, you get a very sort of bohemic, impression that, somehow, even while, depicting Pakistan in a bad light, he still has a space, a soft corner for Pakistan. But actually, I think, as you have already mentioned, that is there a chance of a false flag operation? I think, in my presumption, there is fairly very probable possibility and probability that in near future, if just to up the ante and just to reclaim their self-built political consensus within and also in international arena, I think there could be a false flag operation recently in the Indian health Kashmir.
All right. I'll take my last question from Dr. Kaleem. When we look at the current political scenario of the country and how it has evolved in a few years and more in the past, we've seen that there has been a lot of protests on the roads and a lot of demonstrations, and that's fine as it is in a democratic country. But when we talk about the way it has developed and the kind of protests that we have seen in Pakistan, there's of course a lot of involvement of security agencies, particularly police on the streets as well, and a lot of blame shifting has been done with regards to how certain security challenges need to be met and what sort of measures need to be taken. Do you think that our security agencies, particularly the police, has evolved with the evolving political scenario in our country as well to deal with the upcoming challenges, the new forms of challenges that exist on the domestic front, and have learned new ways of responding also in action in terms of strategy?
Sana, thank you. I'll just supplement what Colonel Abid has just said and what our senior analyst Farrukh was citing. A lot of things are done, but it is never disclosed. The armed forces of Pakistan have preempted and prevented numerous of flag attack sort of situations and attempts. But a lot of the time, you don't even disclose what has been happening. So they have done a wonderful job in the context. Even in policing, like a policing car, when it moves through a neighbor, if a dacoity is taking place or someone is planning to commit a crime, when he see a patrol, he doesn't commit a crime that day. In a similar way, the alertness of the armed forces of Pakistan ensures that the actions are prevented and preempted, and many times they don't even take credit and disclose that. Now, coming to the other part of the question, state while implementing law has to be ruthlessly ethical. And I keep on saying this, ruthlessly ethical while enforcing a law. While fighting against crime and criminal, they cannot become a criminal themselves. Like that is what I keep on emphasizing, fight terrorism, not terrorists. Go to the root cause and try to overcome that. As far as law and order situation which you mentioned on the road, there is my recent article that you have seen, the inflation, crime and response. We have to come up with an emergency response because there is a very severe price hike and everybody is feeling the heat. Just see what's going to happen in next couple of months. Already 14.4% is your inflation. We are in the global hunger index 92nd out of 116 countries. The situation is bad. Even good people may start committing crime. Now on the streets, yes, police needs to improve upon their rules of engagement. And the best way to do it is to involve and interact with people and community and to see what their needs are. I recently went to Abu Dhabi, and Hidayah Center over there is doing a wonderful job of trying to find out early signs. You have to see early signs prevailing in society, and then you can preempt and prevent and respond accordingly.
That's great. Thank you very much, Dr. Kaleem, for joining us, and Colonel Abid for joining us and being a part of the debate and sharing your views. We will now be quickly moving on to a second segment with regards to the Punjab by-elections that are due to be held on the 17th of July on 20 vacant seats. And this, of course, is something that is going to be important for the political party, especially in terms of how it's going to manifest in the general elections, and then, of course, the elections of the CM to be held on the 22nd of July as well. Farrukh, when we look at at the current situation, we've seen all the political parties gear up for their campaigns, and they've also released their schedule of rallies. How important is this particular election for political parties? And secondly, when we look at the current situation of Punjab with regards to the CM and the decision that has come out, how is the fate of these by-elections going to affect that?
Right, Sana, it is quite an interesting question because recently, as you know, actually on April 16, when the election for the Chief Minister took place, you remember the kind of ruckus we saw in the Punjab Assembly, right? There was a lot of violence, and because of that, and because of all these bottlenecks that was created by the previous government or outgoing government, there was this very interesting issue of the legitimacy of the oath of Chief Minister of Punjab, right? And that actually kept on lingering in the courts. And we know that after that there was a judgment from the Supreme Court where it was said that the people who have actually switched sides, they will not be allowed, excuse me, they will not be allowed to vote in any election, either inside the parliament, right? Because of that, the people, 25 of the people who voted for the current Chief Minister, they were disqualified and their votes were also disqualified, right? After that, situation is such that none of the parties has the kind of majority that is needed. That is 186 seats, right? At this moment, when you talk about PMLN, it has support of 176. And when you talk about PTI, it basically has 168. And if 5 more members who were re-notified or there were changes, new people from, indirect seats were actually nominated and then they qualified, if they vote, their number escalates to 173. So at this moment, if you need the kind of number that is needed to form a government, then you need to pass that threshold of 186. And that's why these 20 seats that are in play right now are very important, because whosoever gets the majority here, and remember that PMLN only needs 9 seats or 8 seats or 7 to actually cross that threshold. PTI needs substantially more. If any party gets clear majority in these seats, they will form the next government in Punjab, and the elections of that are going to take place after 17th of July, when these elections have taken place.
Right. Faisal, when we look at the current situation with regards to the PMLN, the PTI and other parties involved as well, then of course, as Farrukh has explained, there's a lot on the table at the moment. What are the chances, do you think, in terms of the current scenario that exists within the country and the way that the people are perceiving the economic challenges and the government's decisions? How do you think the by-elections are going to play out? Punjab, of course, has always been a huge supporter of the PMLN. We've seen in the past. We've also seen a lot of support of the PTI, in particular in their rallies in Lahore and elsewhere in Punjab. So how would you feel about the results of these elections in terms of the seats that are there and the kind of perception that exists in our voters?
So now, if we look at the points which can play a key role, number one, obviously inflation, and the current government, they had to make very harsh decisions, very hard decisions to make, but still they made them. And we know that price hike, especially in the petroleum products, it has its own effect, it will affect. And the second very important point which I wanted to highlight, that the seats we are going to go for an election, by-election, they were, with previously the voters, they voted for, the opposition party. So obviously it was with them previously. And I think if we talk about the opposition parties, opposition party only needs 13 out of 20. And of course, as Farrukh has mentioned, 9
only
seats.
13 out of 20.
Yeah, only 13, and these 20 seats, they actually belong to them previously. So
No, there's something very interesting happening. The people who were disqualified weren't allowed to contest in the elections,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and now they're running from PMLN's side. So at this moment, the question is who actually holds sway. You are right about inflation, but there is another question at hand as well. Compared to the previous chief minister from PTI, there is no doubt that the current or incumbent chief minister is thought to be a person who is doer, right? So the impression among the masses is that perhaps he can actually deliver more in the long run.
Right.
So that's why there is a possibility, because many of these seats actually were contested independently, and then those people joined PTI.
Yeah, shifted.
So now that means that their own vote bank must be intact as well. If it is going to be fought on contested on the issue of inflation, even then this party has advantage in anti-incumbency. The only benefit that PTI can have is this idea of lotocracy, or people actually changing sides,
Right.
and then this narrative of conspiracy.
And
I don't think it is going to sell.
And Sana,
Yes.
if we obviously talk about the current government, of course they made very hard decisions, but end of the day they were the decisions to settle up the economy, the economic affairs.
But the real
obviously,
question
we
is if
saw-
people understand that. They
Yeah,
haven't come out on the
people
streets yet, so
understand
maybe
that.
they do.
That is a big question mark, and I think all of the parties, they are trying their level best in their processions. They are trying to show people the real factors which were being fought by this government since they took the office. So I think to some extent maybe they will be successful, but still if we talk about whether these elections will be conducted free and fairly,
Yes,
on
exactly.
ground, on ground the things are very clear that so far everything is going free and fair, and no pre-poll rigging is taking place, and we are sure that every time it's a set pattern. Whenever there is election or a by-election, after that we keep on hearing that there was rigging, that is
you never
why.
lose in Pakistan.
You never lose in Pakistan.
Yeah.
There's always
we will
rigging.
Be, we will be prepared for that.
No, but the problem is law and order on the ground.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The issue is not of whether there was transparency. The emotions, situation
Yes.
is very emotive, so there can be violence. Yes, Sana.
Absolutely.
I know you
And
want to actually
no,
welcome
I
that.
was just coming to that to you as well with regards to what we talked about in the Sindh by-polls, the kind of violence that we've seen in certain polling stations, and then of course the remarks regarding the transparency of the elections. Is a similar thing also expected in Punjab? Are we prepared to be dealing with that, and whether or not there can ever be elections that can be called free and fair by all parties?
Sana, I don't think that the latter part is ever going to be seen
Okay.
because political culture has to change.
Yeah.
I've been covering elections for past 25 years, and every time I've seen, and before that I was citizen, right? So I've at least witnessed that no party, and it has something to do with the culture of politics in this country, no party accepts the results if it is against them, right? But at this moment, when you talk about law and order situation, there are highs and lows. For example, when you talk about the collective consciousness of this country as narrated or framed by the media, because most of our anchors and news reporters are hail from Punjab or urban centers, usually in Sindh there isn't that kind of focus, unfortunately. In Punjab, every street is mapped. So media actually knows how to report that.
Okay.
So if there is more direct focus on these proceedings, there's a chance that we might be able to avert the kind of violence we saw in Sindh. But frankly, everyone needs to, especially the media needs to teach people,
Absolutely.
but tell them that you keep on fighting, and politicians, while today they might be fighting, tomorrow they might actually create an alliance. So your lives are not that dispensable, and you must realize that you shouldn't be actually sacrificing your lives
Absolutely.
for the party causes.
And that of course needs to be the concern that guides your choice as well in these elections and others as well, and not perhaps blind loyalty to political parties. And that's the hope that we can get from these elections, and we hope that we come to a point where we can actually have a consensus and agreement in terms of at least the process of the elections. Thank you so much for watching the debate. We'll see you tomorrow.